Okay, well, welcome everybody. Tonight we look at Chapter 7. Chapter 7 will probably be two parts, and we're taking a look at the four beasts rising out of the great sea and the little horn. So in Daniel chapter 7, we're going to see vision 2, symbolic beast and horns. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, giving a summary of the matters. Tonight we will study this summary and see what Daniel's dream and visions tell us about biblical history and the implications for our day. The recapping structure chart for Vision 2 is on page 88 in our books. So this chart will show us the symbols of Daniel chapter 2. Let me get a pointer here too so I can point. So it's going to show us the symbols of chapter 2, of chapter 7, and soon we will be looking at the symbols in Daniel 8, the image, beast, and horns, and then we will see the literal kings of Daniel 11. So the recapping chart, structure chart, will show us the progression of persecuting kingdoms surrounding Yah's people. Now keep in mind the recapping structure chart again will display the symbols, the images, the beast, and the horns. So the recapping structure chart is different than the other structure charts evaluating the heavenly visions and so forth. Now notice that these are not normal animals. They are blended chimeric beast kingdoms whom reside, whom rule and reign over nations, people, and tongues. So these are not normal creatures. Again, they are a blend, that they are chimeric beast kingdom ruled by beast men leaders. So we continue with our introduction, which is on page 89. So our structure chart for Vision 2 is to the left. So this is the structure chart, and you see how it differs from the recapping structure chart. So this structure chart is going to show us the heavenly scene, the interlude question, the historic prophetic outline, answer to questions, and the end time event. So yes, go ahead and read the rest of the introduction.
The second heavenly scene is given to Daniel in a night vision. The symbolic beasts are revealed in the first few verses. In Daniel 7:8, a symbolic horn appears. As noted on the previous slide, the first four beasts will be a recapping of the identical earthly kingdoms brought forth in the symbolic image of Daniel 2. Additional information is presented regarding characteristics of the beasts. A fifth kingdom, the little horn, and a timeline are added, which moves the outline forward in time from AD 476 to 1798. Daniel 2 dealt largely with political matters and Yah's plan for Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar as king. Daniel 7 is also political, but deals largely with religious matters and Yah's plan for the deliverance of his people from the little horn. 3 times in the chapter, there is a strong emphasis on Yah's judgment and his plan for deliverance, a theme that runs through the entire book of Daniel.
Okay, so we noted about midway down that introduction, Charlene identified a fifth kingdom, the little horn, and a timeline are added. Now, I just want to let everyone make a distinction between various teachers and that sort of thing. So I want everyone to make a note of the numbering. The numbering and the identification of beast kingdoms vary among eschatology teachers. This is partially due to whether or not teachers identify Egypt and Assyria as beast kingdoms prior to those revealed in the book of Daniel. Either way, they still have a forward progressive movement. And I totally track with Charlene's mapping of the beast kingdoms within the book of Daniel. However, I probably would classify some of these kingdoms as associate or sub-kingdoms of the iron legs. So anyway, I want to let everyone know that you will see differences between teachers. So my personal understanding to date of the seven beast kingdoms are as follows. And like with most of us, our understanding may change as we gain more insights and continue our study. So these are the seven beast kingdoms as I understand them today. But at the same time, I totally agree with how Charlene is laying them out in the book of Daniel and these sub-kingdoms, if you will, of the iron legs. So my overall seven beast kingdoms that I see begin with Egypt, Assyria, then Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. And the seventh one I view as Mystery Babylon. I alluded to this last week. It seems to me that present day blended quote unquote Israel is being ruled by those that say they are Jews and are not. And they are those that follow the Babylonian Talmud. Now keep in mind, they are presently occupying the land of Israel. And so if we go with our beast definition, usually that identifies beast kingdoms because there's a slew of kingdoms. But a beast kingdom usually has taken captive Yahweh's people or has usurped the land. So for that reason, I view present day blended Israel, those that say they are Jews and are not, as being Mystery Babylon or the seventh beast. Now, the eighth beast I will share with you all tonight of where I'm being led. That's not to say I have it all figured out. I'm just sharing with you all what I am seeing. Now, we need to take a quick look at the associated prophetic keys listed. Now, on page 89, it references prophetic keys 1 through 9, 6, 13, and 22. I'm going to take us to page 17 briefly because it's very important what is written. So on page 17, on the 9th prophetic key, it reads, Daniel is the presentation of world history before it happens. And Revelation is the unfolding of that prophecy. This unfolding adds detail, clarity, and understanding. The book of Daniel gives wisdom and understanding for the exposition of Revelation. Daniel's prophecies are built on basic concepts and in turn lay the foundation for fulfilling prophecies of Revelation. These concepts are realized and understood by the consistent use of the prophetic keys, understanding context, continuity, verse sequencing, and alignment, and the structure that unfolds in Daniel's book. And then the last sentence, The Bible student must understand the basic concepts in Daniel first. Then the prophecies of Revelation will unfold. It may be difficult to understand the 7 heads on the composite beast of Revelation 13:1 if the 7 earthly persecuting kingdoms of Daniel are not understood first. So that is very, very important, these prophetic keys. So in addition, I'm just going to hit a few more. Key 6, number 6, this vision follows the same literary structure as the vision in Daniel 2. And also key number 22, this vision contains a timeline within the historic prophetic outline section. Okay, now we are going to see that Daniel has not only a dream, but he has night visions. So I wanted to clarify what night visions are. They are more like a television playing before the person's eyes while they are not asleep. Now, the person's eyes can be open or closed. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as an open vision. And personally, I kind of see television as Satan's counterfeit. So dreams most often occur as you sleep. So we will see Daniel have both. Okay, Kim, would you read the titles and then the scripture, please?
Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts. Daniel's dream and visions, 553 BC. Daniel 7:1. In the first year of Belshazzar, sovereign of Babel, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, giving a summary of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I was looking in my vision by night and saw the 4 winds of the heavens stirring up, symbol for strife, political commotion, and war. The great sea, symbol for peoples, nations, and tongues.
Okay, so now the very first verse sets our time period. It's in the first year of Belshazzar, okay? So we recall, excuse me, we recall Nabonidus assigned the kingship to his son Belshazzar in 553 BC. Now in this chapter, we are stepping back into the kingdom of Babylon. Therefore, we see the chapters within the book of Daniel are not always in chronological order, because just last week we were studying about Daniel in the lion's den under King Darius during the Medo-Persia Empire. So this chapter takes us back to the time period of Babylon. And we see the genealogical chart down here where Belshazzar is Nabonidus's son. So there's several verses cross-referenced with these verses. One is Jeremiah 25:32. It reads, Thus said Yahweh of hosts, see, evil is going forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind is raised up from the farthest parts of the earth. Now we're going to be looking at the definition of wind being ruach in Hebrew, and how it is defined. It can be related to a spirit, or we often say, when we say Ruach HaKodesh, we're referring to Holy Spirit. And so we're going to look at that definition. But word evil, I want to emphasize in this scripture. See, evil is going forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind, or a great whirl of a spirit possibly, is raised up from the farthest parts of the earth. We have Revelation 17:15, and he said to me, the waters which you saw where the horse sits are peoples and crowds and nations and tongues. And Isaiah 17:12, woe to the uproar of many people who make a noise like the roar of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. We also have in verse 2, talking about, I was looking in my vision by night, and I saw the four winds of the heavens stirring up. Again, the four winds stirring up is representing a symbol for strife, political commotion, and war. Stirring up the Great Sea, often referred to as the Mediterranean Sea. And seas are usually symbolic of peoples, nations, and tongues. So that phrase, the four winds of heavens, is found in 4 verses that I found. The one we just read, and when we get to chapter 8, we will read it there. And the male goat became very great, but when he was strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 conspicuous ones came up toward the 4 winds of the heavens. So we'll take a look at that. And again, wind, the word ruach is the word for wind. The definition, spirit or wind of man or seed of mind. Now, as we take a look at this, will we see a connection between these beasts and the scripture in Revelation 9? This is just a question I'm posing, because in Revelation 9:13 through 16, it reads, and the 6th messenger sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden slaughter place, which is before Elohim, saying to the 6th messenger who had the trumpet, release the 4 messengers, those having been bound at the great river Euphrates, and the 4 messengers, those having been prepared for the hour and day and month and year. I mean, that's specific, isn't it? Were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. And the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million, and I heard the number of them. Now, there are 7 continents on earth, and we often hear about Mystery Babylon being located on 7 hills, and people have speculated, where are these 7 hills? And there's several locations that could meet all that criteria. But also, I want us to think about those 7 hills as possibly being 7 continents on the earth. Because we have North America, we have South America, we have Europe and Asia, we have Africa, we have Australia, and we have Antarctica. So over each of these continents, there are satanic principalities, and Satan is classified as the head principality. Then you have powers. Then you have rulers of darkness, which are demons. Then you have spiritual wickedness in heavenly places, which are also demons. And we read about the definition in Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, as I understand spiritual warfare, from what I have studied about it, the principalities and the powers give the marching orders, if you will, to the lower ranked demonic level of rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. That is why when you get up to the level of principalities and powers, I usually say something along the lines, Yahweh rebukes those principalities and powers. Let Yahweh's will be done, because he's given us dominion over demonic powers, and those are the rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. Again, this is just my understanding. So getting back on topic, could these released angels of the Euphrates that we just read about have the same influencing spirits of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome? I wanted us to take a look at Israel and the region. Israel stands at the crossroads. Here's Israel and the capital Jerusalem right here. So Israel stands at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Geographically, it belongs to the Asian continent and is part of the Middle East region. In the west, Israel is bound by the Mediterranean Sea, Lebanon, right here, Syria, border it to the north, Jordan to the east, right here, Egypt, southwest, and the Red Sea to the south. Israel shares the region with the 22 member states in the Arab League. The League has over 400 million people, and with a total area of 5,148,048 square miles. Okay, so this is Israel and the region surrounding Israel. So we just read in Daniel 7:2, Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds, 4 ruachs, 4 spirits of the heaven strove upon the great sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea, more than likely. And in verse 3, we were about to read, will tell us, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And in Revelation 9:14, we read, saying to the 6th angel, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels, which are bound in the great river Euphrates. So my question is that I want us to ponder, is there a connection between these 4 beasts rising up from the sea, diverse one from another, and the 4 angels that we read about in Revelation 9:14 by the river Euphrates, which this is Iraq, and Euphrates, you see, runs straight down the middle of Iraq. So the river Euphrates is right here. So they're coming up from the sea to the land. And then, so I just wanted us to ponder that. It's just something that I saw and I'm sharing. Okay, Kim.
4 symbolic beasts represent 4 consecutive earthly kingdoms. Daniel 7:3. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, different from one another. The lion with eagle's wings and a man's heart. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I was looking until its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and it was given a man's heart. The bear with 3 ribs. And see another beast, a second, like a bear, and it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said this to it, arise, devour much flesh. The leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. After this I looked and saw another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and rule was given to it.
So this is very, very interesting. These are chimeric beasts. They are a blend. Their descriptions show a blended nature of animal beast and men. And so for the first one, the lion with eagle's wings was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and it was given a man's heart. And then the bear with 3 ribs, I thought it was interesting where it said, and they said this to it, arise, devour much flesh. And my question is, who is they? That's one of my questions. And also the leopard with the 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and rule was given to it. So in the end of days, Yahweh is allowing these beast kingdoms and beast leaders to let prophecy unfold. Now you'll note on page 90, the prophetic keys. Number 14, it says in Daniel 7, verse 4 through 8, symbols of beast and horns are employed. Therefore, the language is no longer only literal. And in prophetic key number 16, the symbols that are used are word pictures of something that is not real. So these are symbolic images. So historically, as we are reading, these beasts have risen consecutively. However, in the end of days, they will be joined by unholy alliances and present themselves as unified. So note these creatures are blended chimeric beasts, and all will become connected to Mystery Babylon. Okay.
A dreadful beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. Daniel 7:7. After this I looked in the night visions and saw a 4th beast, fearsome and burly, exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the rest with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. A little horn emerges from among the 10 horns. Daniel 7:8. I was thinking about the horns. Then I saw another horn, a little one, coming up among them, and 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots before it. And see, eyes like the eyes of a man were in this horn, and a mouth speaking great words.
So this beast could not even be compared to any creature Daniel had ever seen. He didn't quite know how to even describe it. He just called it a dreadful beast. The iron teeth tell us that Rome is most definitely involved in this chimeric beast. Not only is it involved in this chimeric beast, but it will be involved all the way down to the toes of the beast. We always see this prominent metal all the way down to the tippy toes. So these are beast kingdoms and beast men leading each of these beast kingdoms. So I want us to pause and get our heads wrapped around these beasts. I believe this is so important, so we're taking a little side detour, if you will, and also just a review. So we're very familiar by now with this statue, and we're talking also about the iron. So I want us to focus on the iron legs. The iron legs in general are symbols for Rome. And Rome becomes mixed with clay as it continues on down to the feet and toes. So if we see the note on page 94, verse 12, it says, concerning the rest of the beast, it should be noted that the kingdoms that lost their dominion to the succeeding kingdoms were not annihilated. Often the conquerors adopted much of the culture, philosophy, and religion of the conquered. When Babylon was conquered by Medo-Persia, Babylon's subjects were permitted to live for a season and time under their own customs and traditions. The same applied to Medo-Persia, Greece, and pagan imperial Rome. However, under the rule of the little horn power, the new subjects were expected to conform to the customs and traditions of the new religious power. For those who refused, it resulted in severe persecution. So the eastern leg we identified as Byzantine, which includes, as time progresses, Turkey, Khazars, Ottoman, and the Balfour Declaration made a huge change when man declared Israel a state in the Middle East in 1948. And we'll take a deeper look at the eastern leg as we proceed as well. Okay, so we have the four beasts of Daniel 7, and we have the little horn. Now, I want us also to look at the beast of Revelation, evil beast. I included Satan the dragon in this list. He's the dragon. I guess we could call him a dragon beast, but Satan is identified as the dragon, mainly in the book of Revelation. And it says in Revelation 12:3, and another sign was seen in the heaven, and see a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. Then in Revelation 13, part A, we see the following. And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as having been slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the earth marveled after the beast. So here in Revelation 13a, we see the picture, the same picture of Daniel chapter 7. But in this picture, we see them all interconnected together. And we see 7 heads, and we can count them right here. The bear, the dreadful beast, the leopard's 4 heads. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the lion's 7. And also it's recorded, and I saw one of his heads as having been slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the earth marveled after the beast. So that's another beast of Revelation. And in Revelation 13b, we see, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. So Revelation 13a beast comes up out of the sea, just as Daniel 7, those beasts came up out of the sea. The beast in Revelation 13b is when they see another beast coming up out of the earth. and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, equating to the false prophet or false prophets. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from the heaven on the earth before men. So he will probably deceive many. Then in Revelation 17, we see, and he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. You notice the beast in Revelation 13a is not red, nor is there red mentioned in the Daniel 7 beast. But here in Revelation 17, we see the beast described as a scarlet beast, which also connects us back to the dragon. So I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast covered with names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup filled with abominations and the filthiness of her whoring. There is also a beast recorded in the pit in Revelation 9:11. It says, and they have over them a sovereign, the messenger of the pit of the deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. The Revelation 17 beast takes on all the characteristics of the other beasts, plus it is scarlet red, inclusive of the dragon colors. And also Esau, the Edomites, and Mount Seir all equate to red, blood red. Now, if you recall, Esau married into the Ishmaelites. Esau usurped Ishmael's patriarch. In my understanding, the last beast, which is number 8, is identified by its ruling color, red. It signifies not just one present day religion, but a new one world religion and a new one world government beast. The final beast of the Great Tribulation in the last 3.5 years, and this is just my opinion, is inclusive of Esau, who may equate to being the Assyrian or the Mahdi, and all evil powers and false religions wrapped into the counterfeit one new dragon man. So are we seeing the counterfeit of Yahuwah's kingdom of priests being the one new man? Or are we seeing the counterfeit of Satan's one new dragon man, all becoming one and of the same mind? So we'll look at Revelation 17 a little bit more closely, but I want to share some things that I have gleaned from previous studies. One of those studies, I gleaned much information from the Islamic perspective from a study that Kimberly Rogers Brown did titled The Kingdom of Edom, the Enemy We Face. And I'll be sending out links afterwards. She identifies the Sunnis as mainly descendants of Esau and the Shiites descendants of Ishmael. She goes on to say that not all Muslims are Edomites. Now, that's true. I mean, only Yahuwah can separate the wheat from the tares. So I don't really want us to focus on any people group. I want us to focus more as being wheat and tares, okay? Those of Yahweh's kingdom and those of Satan's kingdom. So in the end of days, I want us also to ponder this, because prophecy repeats itself 2 to 3 times, usually in the ancient biblical times, then in the times of Yahusha HaMashiach, and then in the latter days in which we live. So just keep that in mind. So is it possible in the end of days, the little horn that comes up in Daniel 7:8 may be repeated as the Mahdi that plucks up the only 3 remaining Shiite nations on earth? Those nations are identified by Kimberly as Iraq, Iran, and Syria. So the beast man, the anti-Messiah that rules the conglomerate 8th beast. I mean, we just looked at the 8th beast in my mind, is in Revelation 17. There you go. To me, there you go. There's the 8th beast. One world government reflects Esau, just as the one new man of Yahusha HaMashiach reflects Jacob, Israel, Yahweh's firstborn. We read about this in Genesis 25, verse 23 through 26. And Yahweh said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older serve the younger. When the days were filled for her to give birth, and see, twins were in her womb. And the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment. That hairy garment phrase right there will come into play probably when we get into chapter 8. So they called his name Esau. And afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Yaakov, or Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the big picture of Revelation is a war that started in the womb between Esau and Jacob, which was renamed Israel. And it's over the birthright and the blessing. But to break it down even more, the book of Revelation is the battle between good and evil, the battle between Yahusha HaMashiach and Satan, and we know that Yahusha has already given us victory. So in Revelation 17, trying to get our head wrapped around these beast kingdoms, I'll start in verse 10. And there are 7 sovereigns, 5 have fallen and 1 is, and the other has not yet come. Okay, so we talked about that being Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. Those were the 5 that had fallen during John the Revelator's time period in which he was writing. And 1 is, well, the one that was present during his lifetime was Rome. And the other has not yet come, which I am seeing, I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but I am seeing that the present day man named Israel in the Middle East that is occupying the present territory, those that say they are Jews and are not, and that's not to say there are not real Jews in the land and real believers in the land, because the house of Israel and the house of Judah are dispersed all over the earth. So the seventh is, I'm seeing as mystery Babylon, those that had come back to Jerusalem with the Babylonian Talmud, and that is the scripture that rules that land, the man commentated scripture that rules that land. So when this seventh beast comes, which that's who I see as being the seventh beast, he has to remain a little while. And the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth and is of the seven and goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 sovereigns who have not yet received a reign, but receive authority as sovereigns with the beast for 1 hour. They have one mind, and they shall give their power and authority to the beast. They shall fight with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is master of masters and sovereign of sovereigns. And those with him are called and chosen and trustworthy. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the whore sits are peoples and crowds and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, these shall hate the whore and lay her waste and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For Elohim did give it unto their hearts to do his mind, to be of one mind, and to give their reign to the beast, until the words of Elohim shall be accomplished. And the woman whom you saw is that great city, having sovereignty over the sovereigns of the earth. So that great city I identify as Jerusalem. We will see more as we proceed. But basically, this eighth beast is most definitely influenced by Esau, red. And this eighth beast is a conglomerate beast. They are of one mind. We're seeing the fruition of Satan's rule, forming his one new dragon man, if you will. Again, Satan counterfeits everything. So just hang with me as we proceed. Now, I want us to take a look back at the seventh beast that will rule for a little while. So based on the definition of a beast kingdom, and so we have to understand what a beast kingdom is. It has to be defined because there are many, many, many kingdoms. But a beast kingdom is one having conquered Yahweh's people and occupied the land of his people. So that is why I conclude the seventh beast is the present day man named Israel in the Middle East, being ran by those that say they are Jews and are not. A chimeric beastly blend, if you will, of all nationalities coming in and saying they are Jews and are not. And they follow the Babylonian Talmud. So many of the Palestinian farmers that are in that region have a more direct lineage back to the patriarch tribes than most. In my understanding, Daniel 9:27 kicks off the last week. In Daniel 9:27, it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So in my understanding, Daniel 9:27 kicks off the last week. 3.5 years of tribulation, which is kind of a gradual thing, and 3.5 years of great tribulation. The seventh beast, if I'm correct, which I'm saying is present day Israel, those that say they are Jews and are not, initiate an agreement that is signed. I see that as beginning the first half of the week, the first 3.5 years. And those, it may be non-climatic when it first begins, but it's going to heat up and heat up more until the agreement is broken, as just stated in Daniel 9:27 at the midpoint. At that time, that's going to ignite the last 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation that we read mainly about unfolding in the book of Revelation. The seventh beast may also, now keep this in mind, the seventh beast may also announce their Messiah and initiate their blood sacrifices of animals and possibly the red heifer. Okay. So we know the exiles of Judah returned to Jerusalem after the first Babylonian beast kingdom, and in the end of days, Israel, the two sticks that become one, will be gathered out of mystery Babylon. We also know that Yahusha was born under the rule of the Roman Empire, the iron legs. And we also know that he ushered in his kingdom of Melchizedek priest back to the reigning position. Hallelujah. So that's also taking place. It's just not only beast kingdoms rising up, but he restored the Melchizedek priesthood back to the reigning position. He proposed to us with his new covenant confirming gospel message ratified by his precious blood. He set us apart to himself out of every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. We are the true Israel born from above. We are the one new man in Yahusha. We are the temple. We are also his witnesses, as stated in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. Now, in Revelation 11, it defines who the two witnesses are. The two witnesses are the two olive trees and the two lampstands. We read about that in verse 4, but let's start with verse 3. And I shall give unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees. So the two witnesses that are spoken of in verse 3 are defined in verse 4. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth. This equates, as far as the two olive trees, probably to Judah and Israel. And the faithful believers of Philadelphia and Smyrna are reflected by the two lampstands, because we know the 7 congregations were identified as lampstands, and those two were the only ones without condemnation. So after 3.5 years of witnessing, and this is all in Revelation 11, the two witnesses are slain by the beast that comes up out of the pit. Now we saw that in Revelation 9:11. And Yahweh raises the two witnesses up after 3.5 days. They're laying dead in the street of the city of Jerusalem. and calls them up to heaven. So we have two witnesses. Now, some may just think those are two individuals. That's a possibility. I'm just sharing with you all how I see it. I think it's more than two. Will there be two guiding ruachs like, Moses and Elijah? Very possibly. But we are his witnesses. But anyway, they lie dead for 3.5 days, and then they're called up to heaven. So right there, we see a catching away right there in chapter 11. Now, moving from chapter 11, the two witnesses have been called up, and in Revelation 12, the next scene we see is the woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet, giving birth to the male child, the one new man, which is caught up to the throne room of Elohim. So the child that's birthed is caught up to the throne room of Elohim. So we see another catching away, if you will, in Revelation 12. The fiery red dragon, Satan, is also present, ready to devour the child. Toward the end, however, of Revelation 12, we see the woman and the dragon on earth, because in that scene, the dragon is kicked out of heaven and cast to the earth. In Revelation 12, 13 through 17. Kim, would you read those verses, please?
And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. And out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman, to cause her to be swept away by the river. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yahusha Messiah.
So this may be where the 144,000 come into the equation as the stone that crushes the feet of the statue designated by Yahusha. The woman appears to be nourished in the wilderness, or the base camp, if you will, for the last 3.5 years. However, the dragon goes to make war with the remnant of her seed, because we just read that the woman is given 2 wings like an eagle, and though the dragon spews out water after her like a river, the earth opens and protects her, and she is flown into the wilderness where she is taken care of by Elohim. So the dragon, being enraged, goes to make war with the remnant of her seed. And the remnant of her seed are those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yahusha HaMashiach. So we have the 2 witnesses being brought back to life on earth in Revelation 11. Then they are called up to heaven. Doesn't state which heaven. Could be first, second, or third. Next, in Revelation 12, we see the woman in the second heaven, clothed with the sun and giving birth, who reappears on the earth at the end of Revelation 12. So could her remnant be inclusive of the possibly hand-selected 144,000 that are sealed for their end-time roles? Just pondering this as we go and as we continue our studies, Yahusha will reveal insights to us. So switching gears now, so just stay with me, keep tracking with me. I want to give us a little bit more detail about that eastern iron leg. And there's a timeline right here to the left of the screen. 667 BC, founding of Byzantium, then Constantinople, Byzantium becomes Roman capital. Empire permanently splits after the death of Theodosius. Justinian crowned emperor. Hagia Sophia is built. Remember, that was that church that was recently converted to a mosque. Justinian's generals recover much of the Roman Empire. Italy is captured by the Lombards. Basil II defeats Bulgarians. Bulgaria is conquered. Death of Basil II. Beginning of decline. Great Schism. Alexis I. Arrest, decline. Byzantine and Crusade armies recapture Nicaea. Death of Manuel restarts decline. Crusaders capture Constantinople and form Latin Empire. Michael recaptures Constantinople. Ottoman Turks capture Constantinople. Fall of the empire. So we see how the eastern leg brings in the Ottoman Turks and Islam. So this is just a map of the Byzantine Empire, and the graphic here shows that the extent of the empire under Justinian is based on the red line. Then the empire in about 1020 is the pink area, and then the empire in about 1360 is only the red areas. So the official proclamation of the Union in Hagia Sophia was postponed until December 1452. However, on May 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. Sultan Mehmed II transformed Hagia Sophia into a mosque, and the few partisans of the Union fled to Italy. So that is interesting that, you know, we just recently heard about Hagia Sophia being converted to a mosque, but that wasn't the first time. The first time apparently it happened in 1452. And these are just excerpts from this link from Britannica about the Eastern Orthodoxy, the Mongol invasion. So these are just clips. The West, in spite of much ignorance and prejudice, had a constant interest in the Eastern Church. At times, there was a genuine and respectful curiosity. In other instances, political and proselytistic conversion concerns prevailed. Relations with the West, especially after the 17th century, were often vitiated in the East by the incredible corruption of the Turkish government, which constantly fostered diplomatic intrigues. The Muscovite Russia, meanwhile, had acquired the consciousness of being the last bulwark of true orthodoxy. In 1472, Grand Prince Ivan III married Sophia, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor. The Muscovite sovereign began to use more and more of the Byzantine imperial ceremonial, and he assumed the double-headed eagle as his state emblem. In 1510, the monk Philotheus of Pskov addressed Vasily III as Tsar, emperor, saying, "Two Romes have fallen, but the third stands, and a fourth there will not be." The meaning of the sentence was that the first Rome was heretical, the second Byzantium was under Turkish control, and the third was Moscow. Ivan IV, the Terrible, was crowned emperor according to the Byzantine ceremonial by the Metropolitan of Moscow, Markari, on January 6, 1547. The prominence and influence of the Khazar state was reflected in its close relations with the Byzantine emperors. Justinian II, Constantine V, each had a Khazar wife. The main source of revenue for the empire stemmed from commerce, and particularly from Khazar control of the east-west trade route that linked the Far East with Byzantium, and the north-south route linked the Arab Empire with northern Slavic lands. Income that was derived from duties on goods passing through Khazar territory, in addition to tribute paid by subordinate tribes, maintained the wealth and the strength of the empire throughout the 9th century. But by the 10th century, the empire faced with the growing might of the Pechenegs to their north and west, and of the Russians around Kiev, suffered a decline. When Sviatoslav, the ruler of Kiev, launched a campaign against the Khazars, 965, Khazar power was crushed. Although the Khazars continued to be mentioned in historical documents as late as the 12th century, by 1030, their political role in the lands north of the Black Sea had greatly diminished. Despite the relatively high level of Khazar civilization and the wealth of data about the Khazars that is preserved in Byzantine and Arab sources, not a single line of the Khazar language has survived. Now, this section is pretty important. If you don't remember anything about this eastern leg, do remember this. Although basically Turkic, the Khazar state bore little resemblance to other Turkic empires of Central Eurasia. So they basically had started off in an Islamic environment. It was headed by a secluded supreme ruler of the semi-religious character called a Kagan, who wielded little real power, and by tribal chieftains, each known as a beg. The state's military organization also seems to have lacked the forcefulness of those of the greater Turkic Mongol empires. The Khazars seem to have been more inclined to a sedentary way of life, building towns and fortresses, tilling the soil, and planting gardens and vineyards. Trade and the collection of tribute were major sources of income. But the most striking characteristic of the Khazars was the apparent adoption of Judaism by the Kagan and the greater part of the ruling class in about 740. The circumstances of the conversion remain obscure, the depth of their adoption of Judaism difficult to assess, but the fact itself is undisputed and unparalleled in Central Eurasian history. A few scholars have even asserted that the Judaized Khazars were the remote ancestors of many Eastern European and Russian Jews. Whatever the case may be, religious tolerance was practiced in the Khazar Empire, and paganism continued to flourish among the population. So these Turkish Khazars, that they had adopted Judaism. They didn't begin with being, quote unquote, a Jew. Okay, Kim, if you would read this section.
The Ancient of Days reigns. Daniel sees thrones being set in place and describes Yahweh the Father. Daniel 7:9. I was looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels burning fire. Daniel sees the number of witnesses at a judgment scene beginning in heaven. Daniel 7:10. A stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge was seated, and the books were opened. Daniel sees the books opened. The investigative judgment was set. The court was convened.
Now just make note about his garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire. And the throne also had wheels. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels burning fire. So this is that heavenly scene. And in verse 10, it said, a stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence. Now, in our study book, these verses are connected to Revelation, chapter 4 and chapter 5. So verses 9 and 10 in Daniel chapter 7 are connected to chapter 4 and 5 of Revelation. John is shown the same scenes Daniel has shown. And immediately I came to be in the spirit and saw a throne set in the heaven, and one sat on the throne. And around the throne were 24 thrones. And on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, dressed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And out of the throne came lightnings and thunders and voices, and 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which of course that resembles a menorah. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of Elohim. And before the throne, there was a sea of glass like crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures covered with eyes in front and in back. And the first living creature was like a lion, and the second living creature like a calf. The third living creature had a face like a man. And the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. These living creatures in Ezekiel are referred to as seraphim, so just keep that in mind. Now, to understand the living creatures from my studies, we have to understand the wilderness encampments, okay? We also read in Revelation 6:9, and when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of Elohim and for the testimony which they held. So in the wilderness encampments, we had the tabernacle in the center, and the Aaronic Levitical priesthood would be gathered in the closest position in 4 quadrants around the tabernacle. Then outside of that would be the 12 tribes around the Aaronic Levitical priest. Now, these 12 tribes each had a lead tribe, a lead banner. We know Judah was the lion. Dan was the eagle, even though sometimes he is referred to being symbolic of a snake. He had 4 different banners over time, and one was an eagle with a snake in its claws. We have Ephraim, the ox, and we have Reuben, the man. So here it connects with the living creatures described in Revelation. And it said they were covered with eyes, front and back. Now, just envision all these tribes. If you were from an aerial position looking down and they were looking up, you would see this lead banner of each with a bunch of eyes behind it. And these living creatures have 6 wings. So if you have, let's take for instance, Judah right here. Judah has the lead banner. It's the lion. And 6 wings would be associated, identifying the 3 tribes behind that particular lead banner. You would have a set of wings for Judah, and a set of wings for Issachar tribe, and a set of wings for Zebulun. And so that same concept goes on around the throne room, if you will. And also keep in mind that in the wilderness encampments, Moses was instructed to do everything as he was shown in the heavenlies, okay? So the heavenly pattern was exactly followed by Moses. He too, like John the Revelator, probably got to see how believers in Yahweh would one day be gathered into being the one new man, because we are one with Yahusha HaMashiach as the head. We are one body functioning together. We know in the wilderness encampments, they would move out in a linear formation. However, in the heavenlies, like the woman given wings in Revelation 12, the four living creatures have 6 wings per quadrant for unit mobility. I mean, this is another realm, if you will. The 6 wings represent the 3 tribal encampments per quadrant. We are a cod with him, believers that have passed on unto life. Their soul and spirit are represented by the numerous eyes on the wings of the living creatures that are in his presence. Believers' souls would not, as I understand it, and I know this is one of those double-minded topics among believers that can trigger one another, and I don't want it to trigger anybody. I want to just explain my understanding so that we can come together and reach agreements on this, but see this pattern that is connecting, and I'll connect all of this to Daniel chapter 7. So Yahweh is not a Yahweh of blending clean and unclean. Therefore, in my understanding, believers' souls that have been redeemed, their sins have been removed as far as the east is from the west, would not be hanging out in a dead, unclean body in the grave, because the body is most certainly in the grave, awaiting its resurrection and to having the incorruptible body at the last trump. Until then, these souls are kept under his wings, because souls need a body of some sort. They need a way, the soul needs something to exist in. So we know the dead bodies of believers will be raised first because they've been awaiting their bodies the longest, and then the rest that are living will be changed in a twinkle of an eye. So this is another diagram, but honestly, this diagram to the left, I believe, more closely reflects the description in the book of Revelation, but some lay it out like a cross, okay? But basically, it's just another view. Again, the Melchizedek kingdom of priests, the bride are positioned closest to the groom, and the 24 elders could be the rotation of the priestly orders. So that could be reflective of the 24 elders. Now, I included this diagram to show an aerial view of what it would look like to see this many souls looking up, and it would look like eyes. And you have, again, the 4 living creatures. These aren't beasts. These are living creatures. And so with the lead banner behind each. So in Yahweh's kingdom, these are not beasts. They are 4 living creatures. The 4 beasts rising out of the great sea may very well be Satan's counterfeit. And honestly, guys, a lot of this came together with me studying and preparing for Daniel chapter 7. Today, I made that connection about how Satan's beast and beast kingdoms are counterfeiting Yahweh's kingdom. In the King James Version, it reads, therefore, if any man be in Messiah, he is a what? He is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. In Matthew 23:37, Yahusha said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to her. How often I wished to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, but you would not. And in Psalm 91, it talks about sheltering us under his wings. Could it be his wings of his living creatures? Could it be? I'm asking the question, and we will see. So prophetic key number 13, this vision introduces new information about the judgment, and in Daniel 8 continues to expand on the judgment theme. Okay, Kim.
Daniel sees the number of witnesses at a judgment scene beginning in heaven. Daniel 7:10. A stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge was seated, and the books were opened. Daniel sees the books opened, the investigative judgment was set, the court was convened. Verse 10, Yahweh appoints a judgment day. The judgment day was set. Acts 17:31. Because he has set a day on which he is going to judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, having given proof of this to all by raising him from the dead. Yahweh appoints a judge. John 5:22. For the Father judges no one, but has given all the judgment to the Son. Acts 10:42. And he commanded us to proclaim to the people and to witness that it is he who was appointed by Elohim to be judge of the living and the dead.
Okay, so in this heavenly scene, in this throne room scene that we briefly talked about in Revelation chapter 4, if someone has their Bible and would turn to Revelation chapter 5 and start with about verse 8.
I have that, Libby.
Okay, that'd be great, Betty.
And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 4 and the 20 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of saints. And they sang a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made unto our Elohim a king of priests, and we shall reign on the earth.
So right there, if we go up to verse 6, it says, And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And then, as Betty read, it said, and they sung a new song. Now, who is singing in these verses? They are the 4 beasts and the 24 elders. That is who is singing this song. And they are singing, "Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us." Who is us? So Yah had redeemed us. They had redeemed the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders. They are singing the song of the redeemed. Thou hast redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of, and now they're telling us more about who they are, who the 4 living creatures are, and the 24 elders, has redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. These are those redeemed souls that were washed by the blood of the Lamb, and has made us unto our Elohim kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. Okay, Betty, can you continue in verse 11?
Yes. And I beheld and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing." And every creature which is in heaven, and every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, heard I saying, "Blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever." And the 4 beasts said, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him that liveth forever and ever.
So we know that the 4 beasts are not angels, because it said in verse 11, "And I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beast, and the elders." And also in verse 13, we see that Yahweh has not only redeemed us, but he has redeemed the land, and he has redeemed all creation. In verse 13, it says, "And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, heard I saying." So, I wasn't planning on going into Revelation 5, but I wanted to go ahead and emphasize that, so y'all can read Revelation 4 and 5 and ponder these possibilities. And Yahusha is our attorney and judge. In 1 John 2:1, it says, "My little children, I write this to you so that you do not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an intercessor with the Father, Yahusha Messiah, a righteous one. For there is one Elohim," in 1 Timothy, "and one mediator between Elohim and men, the man Messiah, Yahusha." Hebrews 7:25. "Therefore, he is also able to save completely those who draw near to Elohim through him, ever living to make intercession for them." In 2 Corinthians 5:10, "For we all have to appear before the judgment seat, which is the Bema seat of Messiah, in order for each one to receive according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil." Now, the Bema seat is different than the great white throne judgment. 1 Peter 4:17, "Because it is time for judgment to begin from the house of Elohim, and if firstly from us, what is the end of those who do not obey the good news of Elohim?" Okay, Kim?
Daniel sees the number of witnesses at a judgment scene beginning in heaven. Daniel 7, 10. A stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge was seated, and the books were opened. Daniel sees the books opened. The investigative judgment was set. The court was convened.
So in those words right there, 1,000 thousand served him and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Very similar language to what we just read in Revelation 5. So the books were open. This is the judgment before the great white throne. If you'll go ahead and read about the book of life.
The book of life, Revelation 20:12. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books, according to their works.
Okay, now I view the dead as being differently than those that have been redeemed and die. And we'll get into that in more detail later. Then we have the book of remembrance, if you will.
Malachi 3:16. Then shall those who fear Yahweh speak to one another, and Yahweh listens and hears, and a book of remembrance be written before him, of those who fear Yahweh, and those who think upon his name.
Okay, so the closing ministry of Yahusha's judgment is part of the heavenly sanctuary scene that will be addressed in Daniel 8. The first phase is the divine judgment or investigative judgment when the books were open. Now, Revelation 11:18, we read, and the nations were enraged, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to give the reward to your servants, the prophets, and to the set apart ones, and to those who fear your name, small and great, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. So right here in this scene, we see the dead will be judged, and the believers will be given rewards to the servants of Yahweh and the prophets, and to the set apart ones and those who fear his name. So let me just go on to explain a little bit about my understanding of the dead, which are different from those that are made alive in Yahusha HaMashiach. Now, keep in mind, no soul entered heaven before Yahusha HaMashiach. No soul entered heaven before Yahusha HaMashiach. When believers died prior to the time of Yahusha's death, burial, and resurrection, those that were believers went to the bosom of Abraham. And there was a great chasm between the comfort side of Sheol and the torment side of Sheol. That's just briefly, that's a whole different topic. But the dead never accepted Yahusha's covenant proposal. Their souls were not redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. They will be judged by their works at the great white throne judgment, whereas the redeemed will appear before the Bema seat judgment. Okay, so this judgment scene is being seen in Daniel chapter 7, but it's the same judgment scene that John the Revelator is seeing. On the other hand, the redeemed that have had their sins removed as far as the east is from the west, I mean, our sins have been removed, okay? We are washed by the blood of the Lamb. We have garments, spotless garments, not because of our own perfection, but because of his righteous blood. And believers will only be judged for their kingdom work in order to receive their rewards in heaven. Because we read in John 11, and I want to share with you this understanding that I see. I'm not saying that y'all have to agree with me, but I would like you to ponder it because it's from Yahusha HaMashiach himself, as well as from Yahweh when he told Moses, I am the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the Elohim of the living and not the dead. We read his word. His word is the living word. He is in us and we are in him, and he is in the Father, and so forth. We are echad with him. So in John 11, he explains to Martha that he is the resurrection and the life. And we shouldn't confuse the two. Let's read this. Verse 17. Therefore, when Yahusha arrived, he found that he had already been 4 days in the tomb. Lazarus, of course, had died. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 15 stadia away. And many of the Yehudim had come to Martha and Miriam to comfort them concerning their brother. Martha then, when she heard that Yahusha was coming, met him, but Miriam was sitting in the house. Martha then said to Yahusha, Master, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you might ask of Elohim, Elohim shall give you. Yahusha said to her, your brother shall rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. That part she had right. That part she had right. Lazarus's dead body would be resurrected to its glorified state at the last day. If she had it totally right, she would have stopped there, but he doesn't. He goes on to explain to her. Yahusha said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, these are the words of Yahusha. He says, he who believes in me, though he dies, he shall live. And everyone that is living and believing in me shall never die at all. Do you believe this? So I go into this to help us understand about the living creatures, which it appears that Satan is counterfeiting with the beast that we're reading about in Daniel 7. Because keep in mind, these beasts that are coming out of the sea, these are beast kingdoms. With a beast kingdom, you have nations, peoples, and tongues, all gathered under each beast head, if you will, because the beast head is the beast man ruler of each beast kingdom. So do we see the similarities? Do we see the beast kingdom and all those under that lead head, if you will? It's a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit bringing together, if you will, and I just coined this phrase today, the one new dragon man. And it's a counterfeit of the one true man, Israel. So believers' dead, decaying bodies are in the grave and will be resurrected on the last day. But keep in mind, when Yahusha, his death, burial, and resurrection, in Revelation 4:1, it talks about a door that had been opened, that partition of separation had been opened. Yahusha is the door. He led captivity captive into his possession. And they could enter then through the door because he had already made full atonement. Okay? So believers' dead decaying bodies are in believers' dead decaying bodies, the flesh and bone are in the grave and will be resurrected on the last day, but their living, redeemed souls are obviously present and identified clearly from every tongue, tribe, people, and nation in Revelation 5, and are housed under his wings of the four living seraphim creatures until they receive their glorified bodies. They are clearly identified and are singing. They are singing the song of the redeemed. Believers that are still living on earth will then be changed in a twinkle of an eye into our glorified bodies. Now, this is a reference guide, and I can send this PDF to you all because there are so many books that are mentioned in the Bible, and these are some that have been extracted and I put in this PDF. So one is the Book of the Living. And in Psalm 69:28, it said, "Let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous." Psalm 139:16, "Your eyes saw my unformed body, and in your book all of them were written, the days that were formed while none was among them." Remember when Yahweh tells Jeremiah, I knew you. I knew you before you were born. I knitted you. I knew you before you were born. Yahweh knew him before he was born, before he was knitted in his mother's womb. So the book of the living, meaning the book of the living records every name of each person born on earth and the number of days of their lives. The book of life, or the Lamb's book of life. In Philippians 4:3 it says, "And I also ask you, true companion, help these women who labored with me in the good news, with Clemus also, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life." So at this judgment scene, when the names are in the book of life, hallelujah. "He who overcomes shall be dressed in white robes, and I shall by no means blot out his name from the book of life, but I shall confess his name before my Father and before his messengers." In chapter 13, verse 8, "And all those dwelling on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life of the slain lamb from the foundation of the world shall worship him." The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep, and goes to destruction, and those dwelling on the earth whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, shall marvel when they see the beast that was and is not, and yet is. "And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were open, and another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works." So without Yahusha HaMashiach, the dead are judged only by their works. And we know that's not good enough. For all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of Yahweh. There is only one way to come out of this beast world into his presence, and that is by being washed by the blood of the Lamb. In verse 15 of chapter 20, it says, and if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Revelation 21:27, and there shall by no means enter into it whatever is unclean, neither anyone doing abomination and falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Revelation 22:19, and if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, Elohim shall take away his part from the book of life and out of the set apart city, which are written in this book. Luke 10:20, but do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names have been written in the heavens. Meaning these are those who follow Yahusha and are his people. Now there's a book of tears, Psalm 56:8. You have counted my wanderings. You put my tears into your bottle. Are they not in your book? Meaning he knows every tear each person has shed. Book of works, Revelation 20:12. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were open, and another book was open, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. Amos 8:7. Yahweh has sworn by the excellency of Yaakov, I shall never forget any of their works. Meaning records of works done in the body, whether good or evil. The book of seven seals, the scroll that we just read about, the Lamb opening in Revelation 5. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, having been sealed with seven seals, meaning this is the deed of redemption. And he is the only one that was worthy to open the deed of redemption of the people, the land, and creation. That is why the souls of the redeemed are singing to Yahweh, the song of the redeemed. The book of remembrance, it's only mentioned in Malachi 3:16. Then shall those who fear Yahweh speak to one another, and Yahweh listens and hears, and a book of remembrance be written before him of those who fear Yahweh and those who think upon his name. Malachi 3:17, and they shall be mine, said Yahweh of hosts, on the day that I prepared a treasured possession, and I shall spare them as man spares his own son who serves him. Meaning records noteworthy acts by his people as a memorial. For instance, Yahweh remembered the prayers and alms offered by Cornelius. We have the book of the covenant, our marriage covenant, blood ratified marriage covenant, Exodus 19 through Exodus 24:11. It's placed inside the Ark of the Covenant with the book of the law. The tutor placed beside the Ark of the Covenant. Chapter 24 of Exodus, verse 7. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Yahweh has spoken we shall do and obey. In 2 Kings 23. And the sovereign went up to the house of Yahweh with all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the house of Yahweh. 2 Kings 23 continues in verse 21. And the sovereign commanded all the people, saying, prepare the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim, as it is written in this book of the covenant. 2 Chronicles. And the sovereign went up to the house of Yahweh with all the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the priests and the Levites and all the people, both great and small. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the house of Yahweh. Revelation 11:19. And the dwelling place of Elohim was opened in the heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his dwelling place. And there came to be lightnings and voices and thunders and an earthquake and great hail. Meaning our marriage covenant in Exodus 19:20 to 24:11 was broken with the sin of the golden calf until Yahusha would usher in the new covenant ratified by his precious blood, the new covenant connecting us back to the promises of Abraham in Genesis 12. by fulfilling the death penalty conditional arm of the guaranteed promise requested by Abraham in Genesis 15. So from this point, we will continue next week on Daniel chapter 7, verse 11. So we'll conclude this tonight and we'll take some Q&A. Okay, so I covered a lot of territory, and I'm hoping that all of you could connect some of those dots and see the patterns, the patterns that are being counterfeited by the enemy, and the patterns that were already on display in the throne room, not only seen by Daniel, but seen by Ezekiel, and seen by Paul, and seen by John the Revelator. So, so those were a lot of the things that Yahweh placed on my heart to share with all of you tonight. And we see those four beasts that are described in Daniel chapter 7, in Revelation chapter 13. But they're different, aren't they? They're all intertwined. They're all starting to connect and form what I coined today as the one new beast man, which is a counterfeit of the one true Israel, the one new man born from above, registered in heaven. Okay. So do y'all have any questions, any thoughts, any different points of view? Did you track with the four living creatures, the encampments, and the lead banners? Maybe not, maybe yes.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I tracked with the four piece. Because I was reading that earlier today and I was like really going over it and over again. I really wasn't grasping it, but you kind of broke it down for me. So yeah, no, I think you did a good job. I definitely will have to listen to it again because there was a lot of meat, you know?
It was a lot of meat.
Yeah, it really
Lots
was.
of meat, yeah.
Yeah, so, but good. I mean, good job.
Okay,
So.
well, good. I'm glad y'all connected.
Can't wait for the recording where I can go over this again.
Yeah, it was a lot. And a lot of it, like I shared, you know, he was connecting a lot of dots for me, and this is really territory that has probably not been covered by any other teacher that you've come across, because it wasn't until probably a year and a half ago or so, Donna would know, Carol Ann and Bruce would know, that I first had that insight when we were studying the book of Revelation, and how the four living creatures are defined just by looking at the English composition of the sentences. You can see who the redeemed are when they are singing. They are saying, "You have redeemed us from every tongue, tribe, people, and nation." And I thought it was so neat as I was kind of in the final touches on tonight's session. Carol Ann sent me that picture of that swan with the little swanlets, if you will, underneath the wings. And then, of course, that made me think about that verse that Yahusha said to Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often he wanted to gather them as chicks under his wings. And Psalm 91 also alludes to that. You'll notice now that we've shared and discussed this, you'll notice now many times that is referenced to being under his wing. So
What was that verse, Libby, where you said I wanted to gather them, the Judah under his wing? Where is that again?
yeah, I'd have to, let me just look that up real quick.
Because that was really comforting to know that he loves us that much, that he wants us to, like, come on, I'll take care of you. Because I do say 91 when I go out and about in this world today, and I just say, put me under your protection. I'm going in without my mask. Just let me go through and just cover me so no one sees me.
It's Matthew 23, verse 37.
Yes. And also in Luke 13:34, it's repeated several times in the Gospels. So you
Okay.
have, yeah.
Yeah, just to solidify that in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good night tonight.
Okay.
Libby,
I'm still processing it.
Libby, I have a
Yes.
question.
Okay.
Can you just clarify for me? Okay, because this is something that I've kind of struggled to understand. You talked about the two, shall I say, compartments of Sheol.
Right.
And then you talked about our souls being under his wing in heaven. So can you just clarify that?
Yeah. Yeah. From the time that Yahusha's death, burial, and resurrection, by the time the door appears opened in Revelation 4:1, okay? So from that time forward, like today, if we were to die, like Paul was saying, absent from the body, present with Yahweh, okay? But before that partition of separation was opened, the souls couldn't be in his presence because Yahusha had not made atonement. Okay, so we see in the Gospels the story about Lazarus and the rich man. And the rich man was in the torment side of Sheol, and Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham. And they could see each other. They could also recognize each other. And they also had a memory of what happened on earth. And so Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, but there's a lot of confusion that comes with it because when was the door shut? Let me ask you all that. When was the door shut?
The golden
Garden
calf incident?
In the garden. Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah, I heard somebody, I think, say in the
Bruce.
garden, right? When Adam and Eve sinned, they were kicked out of Eden. And the seraphim guarded that and shut that connection, direct connection with Yahweh. It was shut, the door was shut. And that was the separation, the partition of separation that only through Yahusha HaMashiach could be opened by him. So, yeah, does that help, Betty, clarify that? Okay, because this is a topic very dear to my heart, and it's dear to other people's heart. And I know it is a double-minded topic, but the patterns just blow it out of the park. When you look at the encampments in the wilderness and the lead banners, see, that's how they would lead out, because they'd hold that banner, that flag up And there was 4 lead tribes, and then the other ones followed behind the lead banner. And those were represented by the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle. Living creatures, living creatures. And behold, all has become new. A new creature. You have become a new creature, because when we are born again, something happens to our DNA, and we are sealed by Him. So anyway, hope that clarifies it. And you know, the two also the strong witnesses were those statements by Yahusha to Martha. Those that believe in me shall never die at all. And Yahweh himself telling Moses, I am the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the Elohim of the living, not the dead. The dead is different. See, when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is life. He is life. And when he was telling Martha, I am the resurrection and the life, she got the resurrection part right. She got it. She hit the nail on the head. But the life part, she didn't get. And he goes on to explain to her that, because he was about to do a new thing, something that no one else had ever seen before. So, yeah, Kim.
So I have some different thoughts in my head, and this was really interesting. Okay, so you talk that passage in Revelation 22 maybe, or 21, about the books. They'll be judged by the books. So the dead are judged by the books, not by the book of life, because their name isn't in the book of life.
Right.
That makes, so then we know it's, I just brought up that this is Psalm 69:28. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. So was their name there and then it got blotted out? See, have you thought about that? Where let them be blotted out of the book of the living, meaning their name was there. Is everybody's name written in the book of life, and then your name can either be blotted out or it will remain?
That's a good question,
So
Kim.
that's interesting. And if it's blotted out, then you will be judged by your works. Okay, so, and we know that all will be raised. As all have died in Adam, all will be raised in Messiah Yahusha. And Paul preached to all a resurrection of life. And I know that many were upset with him. He was thrown in prison for preaching resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wanted to let everybody know you're going to be judged because you will be resurrected. So how did you live the life you were given? And so all are going to be raised. And so then we're raised according to, we know we'll be raised, and then if you will either shine like gold or silver or hay or straw or stubble, right? It'll be shown when you're raised. And then okay, so that's a thought. I have another thought about these beasts, okay, that you were talking about, because I have that written down too, that the banners are a picture of Israel as a whole, right, where they are, their tribes, Judah, whoever was the director, like Judah, right, yeah, as you were describing, Judah, or for Ephraim, his banner was the ox, and Reuben's was the eagle.
The man.
The man.
Reuben was the man,
And Reuben was
and Dan was the eagle.
Yes, and those were the heads of that north, south, east, west directions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so that makes, okay, so that always makes me think of, so when you're raised, so you die and your spirit is taken. And I found it really interesting that you were talking about the watching over the spirits, because I've thought that the spirit, he keeps and guards our spirit, or the spirit of the dead. And
that's a good point, Kim, that you were bringing up, and I think I saw some comment about might be a little confusion about souls and spirit.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, the spirit our spirit man was dead.
Yes.
Until we were born again. It was empty, right? It was dead. We were walking dead. We were the dead before Yahusha HaMashiach, okay? So when we are born anew, it's his Ruach HaKodesh spirit in us. That's our spirit. Yeah. He is in us and we are in him. We are echad with him. Our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. And then we have our flesh and bone body. Okay, so his spirit lives in us, and we are redeemed souls. And that soul element was also present after Lazarus died and the rich man died, because they knew each other. They remembered what happened on earth. And the rich man was suffering in the torment side of Sheol, but Lazarus was not. So I just wanted to clarify about soul and spirit and the body.
So what about in Ezekiel 37, when those dry bones come up and they have flesh and bones and sinews, but they're dry, like they lack spirit, and he will give them a spirit, their spirit. Do you think that it's maybe not the Ruach HaKodesh, it's just a spirit to give them a life, and but they may still be dead in, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just, on my head.
I believe, Kim, and that's a very, very good question. And I believe that's possible, and I'd have to read that chapter again, but I believe that's a picture of Israel, the redeemed bodies being all brought together. Some have been burned, some have been scattered in the ocean, some are in the graves and stuff. And he's gathering the one new man, all the bones and sinews, in forming the one new man there. And I'm glad you brought up Ezekiel again too, because it's very interesting. In Ezekiel chapter 1, in Ezekiel, in Revelation 5, everything's taking place in the throne room, okay? Mm-hmm. Because why? Because Yahusha had entered and opened the door, okay? But in Ezekiel, in the chapter 1 in Ezekiel, we read about the seraphim, but there's a chasm. They're looking up at the throne room. They're not in the throne room, but there's a chasm and they're looking up. So that's another interesting picture. So I'm taking this and I'm y'all's just showing me these things and bringing it together. But today was the first day that he showed me how Satan is counterfeiting all of this into the one new dragon man
Yeah.
that is a replica of the one new man. And it's a picture of the battle between Esau and Jacob, the two nations warring in her womb. I mean, it was just, wow. It was pretty incredible day. And I was trying to get it down on paper in a PowerPoint to be able to communicate those insights.
Yeah, that was interesting. Well, like in Ezekiel 37, this is like an army. They're raised up. It says a great army, which makes all, and it said, Son of man, these bones are all the house of Israel. Our bones are dry, our expectation has perished, and we ourselves have been cut off. And I find that interesting. They're cut off, like they have no hope in that section. But well, something else. Do you ever? Okay, this sounds strange, but this is another side note about the river Euphrates that you talked about. Where is that?
Revelation 9.
And the beasts that come out of the pit. Were you talking about? I can be quiet for a while.
Yeah, Revelation 9 is also the beast, Polyon. But when he comes out of the pit, that was read somewhere else, Kim. I can't.
Okay. Yeah, I just.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Verse
It's
14.
in Revelation 11, Kim, when the beast out of the pit slays the two witnesses.
Oh, okay.
Revelation
Then it
11.
must be 9. I'm thinking of the 4 messengers.
Yeah.
Chapter 9:14.
Oh, okay. And oh yeah, it's like an army.
Yeah.
Like a counterfeit picture, because when I've read a counterfeit bride, a counterfeit
Everything.
son of Israel, a counterfeit kingdom,
Yes.
and John marveled. And John marveled. That always has caught me. He marveled at it. Like,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Kathleen, and then I want to make a comment about Mary Beth made a good comment that I just saw. I want to make a comment about that too.
Oh, you want me to speak?
Yes, please. Yes, I
I
do.
did have on my mind about the people that what will happen to the people that are cremated. Cremation. That is not biblical. That's not biblical.
Yeah, I know there's different views on that, Kathleen, but we also know, I mean, bodies can also be naturally destroyed in a house fire and be burned. But the takeaway is that no matter what happens to, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, he's going to bring those bones and sinews and vessels and all these things together to form that one new man. So that's not the unforgivable sin for sure. Yes, go ahead.
I know that, the Catholic Church, I mean, the creation story is a myth, and they have, everything of, do you wonder why their cathedrals are looking like as if it's supposed to be like heaven? You know what I mean? They are not glamorous, but it's so, I don't know how to explain it.
Ornate.
Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they're representing themselves as the vicar of Messiah, the vicar of Christ. They want to take his place, and they want to be surrounded by all this pomp and wear those long flowing robes and have people call them Father. and rabbis call them rabbis. I mean, there's your sign. When a person allows you to call them a rabbi, or a person that is a believer allows them to be called father.
It's counterfeiting. It's all counterfeiting.
It's a counterfeit. It's a, yes, because
Okay, that's what I wanted to say.
yes, because Satan will come to us as an angel of light. But one thing that Mary Beth had made note of, and there's a lot of good comments, so y'all might want to, share more about your comments. But she said also what Yahusha said on the cross, you will be with me in paradise. That to me doesn't sound like we are asleep. Right. Now, viewpoint on those particular scriptures, it's about a comma and about the word today. Well, what I understand, and I can, we as teachers, we can only impart to others what we have learned today. So never shoot the messenger. They're sharing with people and putting themselves on the line, sharing their insight, which may change down the road, okay? So, but what I see as having happened on the cross was when Yahusha told that one thief, today you will be with me in paradise. That place was in the bosom of Abraham. That place was not in heaven yet. Why? Because he had not risen on the third day yet. Every believer that had passed on had to wait until Revelation 4:1, that door was open. It's just how it was. That's how it was. So, but he was probably chatting it up, Mary Beth, with Abraham and Lazarus.
You have splendidly put this all together tonight. You have splendidly put it together.
Well,
Wow.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was my goal. Was I hope I can convey and show these pictures. Then hopefully the pictures will speak 1,000 words. And as I was preparing this, and I truly value the insights, like all of Charlene's work, and how we can see that iron going down all the way to the tippy toes, and how we're learning more about that eastern leg, and how we're seeing the prominence of Islam in our day. And as Charlene has said, when she was writing the book, it wasn't that prominent as it is now. So to see how that eastern leg fits into the picture, and then from reading that excerpts from that book by Edward Hendry.
Yeah, I have too.
Yes, absolutely. Seeing how Judaism is so closely related to Catholicism, and that Islam is related to all three of them, and why it's going to be a one world religion. It may not be Islam or Catholicism or this or that and the other. It's going to be it would be a one world religion, I believe it's called, or something. But it's going to be whatever they say it's going to be. And we see the similarities of beheadings with the Noahide laws or the Sharia law. I mean, there's just like, the bottom line is that the color is red. The color is blood red. And when we see that beast morph into a red color, and the whore riding the beast in Revelation 17, that's the completed picture. To me, the eighth beast is that Revelation 17 beast, and that color red is letting us know Esau is there. Esau is probably leading that as the, anti-Messiah. But I see that as being the latter 3.5 years. The first 3.5 years will be softer with those that say they are Jews and are not, that are trying to usher in their Messiah now and trying to reinstitute and have instituted animal sacrifices. And they do have a red heifer, and they are wanting to look at possibly even sacrificing that red heifer, which is extremely significant. And they want to do it earlier than the 3 years of age. So that we are watching very closely. But then the latter 3.5 years, when that covenant, that agreement of whatever it is broken, and possibly at that time, the woman that is riding the beast, they get tired of her and they kill her. I mean, it's an Ouroboros, right? It's a snake eating its own tail. And possibly at that point, because in Revelation 12, that's when we see Satan is kicked out of heaven and his minions look at him and say, what? Are you like us now? Like, where's your power? And you'll read in Revelation 12, like all heaven is saying, oh, woe, woe to those on the earth, for Satan the accuser of the brethren has been cast down to the earth. I mean, Satan is grounded. He no longer, see, they're happy because they don't have to deal with him every day anymore, because prior to that, he could appear in the third heaven and be the accuser of the brethren. And they had to listen to those accusations day and night, but he's kicked out in Revelation 12. He's grounded and weakened. Yes, Mary?
I told you about Washington, D.C. when I was there. My grandson's 5, so about 3 years ago. I was there, and there was a big convention, and everybody had the robes on with the triangle in the center of their heart. And I asked them what they were, and they said they were the one world religion. And I looked up to see who the members are of them. And Kenneth Copeland is a member. Joyce Myers of the Catholic Church. There was a whole Baptist. Yeah, they were all members of the one world religion.
Wow. And they signed their name to what was a website, Mary?
It was, I forget now, it's been like I said, 3 years, but I remember looking up and I couldn't believe who I was seeing on the list of the One World Order, who were the members of it.
Mm-hmm.
Religion. So I don't know. I'll try to do research and try to find it again.
Okay.
But I was really shocked.
Yeah, very much so. And
they all had the hoods. And they all had the robe. It just really was a weird, and the whole place was inundated. Inundated, is that the word I use? With them, they were everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we definitely see the beast kingdoms rising, especially like with this pandemic that Jason noted in chat, and how they are using this as a tool. It's testing the waters, if you will. Obey, wash your hands, put on your mask. It's programming. They have all.
It almost makes you want to pick your nose and flick it at people. No, I'm just kidding.
I like that thought.
Here, take it.
I rely on you, Mary and Mary Beth, to keep me on the lighter side of things because I get really deep at times. And I was.
You have to wear your mask. You have to. Can't go anywhere without a mask.
Wow.
Go up and have the
How
few
it's going to
that
be when I drive my bus. You have to wear your mask. You have to spray the bus after each student leaves.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Something else. It is. Yeah, Kathleen, you had your hand up?
Yeah, there's, I was looking one of the Hebrew books. There is a little bit of a write-up on one page about the Mass, of all things.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My son goes to medical administration. Like, he learns a lot of medical stuff. You have to wear your mask. You know?
Yeah.
You won't be allowed to, you're not allowed in stores without it. I mean, you can make a big thing, but no.
Not in Pennsylvania. I mean, everybody wears them, but I walk in and out all the time without mine.
I do
Nobody-
too. I haven't worn one yet.
Yeah.
Wear them all
People-
everywhere I go, except for my car or outside. I mean, I've been to my friends' parties. No one had a mask on. You know,
Mm.
my family comes over. No one's wearing a mask. But when you go into a store, mall, anywhere, you have to wear a mask. When I go to my
And-
job, I have to wear it.
You tried going in without one on?
No, but it says a big sign,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to enter without a mask.
So do ours. All the ones in Granbury had to sign up, and I just walk on in. I
Yeah,
have
same
not
here.
Really don't work that well, but they help a little bit, but you still have germs and stuff all over the place, you know?
But you have germs from the flu and pneumonia and everything
You have
else.
germs from everything. I think it's because they don't know much about it, but
Aren't
Yeah.
they saying that the
want
flu is worse than this going on? The
Yes.
flu?
It's
My
amazing.
brother was a doctor, and he said, absolutely, hands down, this is not as bad. There's more people living than dying, and they just won't. Just won't let it go. They just won't let it go because
I
they're
know.
using it for their agenda.
Exactly. All about submission and control.
Mm.
True.
And that Corsequin, is that the name? Absolutely works to help it to heal. That and zinc. So they do have a cure for it, but they don't want you to know about the cure because they really want the vaccination. That's what they're pushing.
Yeah, I know. I don't know about that vaccination. I don't never take a flu shot, never do any of those things.
Haven't died it.
Mm-mm.
Get sick probably from it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably
No
end
problem about it.
Yeah, they don't have it yet, so
Yeah.
it takes a while to get a shot done, you know. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I'm not getting it.
Yeah. That's where you definitely have to draw the line.
Who knows? That could be like COVID itself, you know, gonna kill whoever's weak. You know, people.
But it's coming to the point where it's going to be compulsory.
That's
Then-
right, Kathleen. I was going to show y'all a clip, but y'all had so many other things to share with y'all tonight that got sidelined. But it was a pastor, I believe his background is Seventh-day Adventist, but he had put together a YouTube video with all these current events, and he did a beautiful job into showing us what we were up against, and it was really well done, and I wanted to share that with y'all. Maybe another time we'll watch that. But Kathleen, I especially want to thank you for sharing with me that what I was trying to explain translated to everybody, because I was wondering that at first because it was a lot of meat. I understand it was a lot of meat. So yes, Kathleen.
I had Martin Weber is pastor in our church, and he had written a book in the early, I think in the 80s, but he did a thing, did a book up, and I've been reading through it, and he was talking about the book of Daniel, and I was really, I was shocked of some of the things that he had even said. So I'm not quite finished the book, but probably next week I will have something to say about it. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. I mean, most of our people are not as deep as what you did it tonight. That's for sure not.
Yeah, well, you know, it just comes with staying in his word and taking on chapters that have intimidated me. And if I didn't get it after I reviewed it the first time, go
Yeah.
back through it and do it again. You get a little bit better. And then the more you stay in his word, it's almost like,
You know how to put it together.
this one's really interested. I think I'll give her a little revelation or something. And yeah, when I read chapter 5, it made my jaw drop when I saw that. I have personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but personally, I don't have any doubt about that. It's just reaffirmed so many ways that I'm pretty solid on that. But I'm willing to listen to other points of view so we can discuss those and really look at them to see if we find that one answer on some of these double-minded topics. Diane, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering what the book was called that you and Kathleen had the same book for you held up earlier.
Yeah, it's called Solving the Mystery of Babylon the Great by Edward Hendry. Yeah, I believe Danon has some of those books. Danon was sweet to send me one, and so there may be a way to get a copy.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
What's the name of that clip?
What, Donna?
What's the name of that clip?
That I saw that I was going to show y'all tonight.
Yeah,
That
what
one?
channel was it on?
Yeah, let me see if it's in my history on my YouTube channel and see. It was really good. It really was good.
Is it a YouTube?
Yeah, it was a YouTube. Oh yeah, it's called No Jab, No Pay by Prophecy Again TV. And
I think I already watched that.
So
yeah, no pay. I think I posted that on my Twitter.
Oh, okay. So you can see why they're pushing toward it to be mandatory. So I'll put it in chat in case we don't get to that point to watch it. There it goes. It's in chat. Okay, Kim.
Well, I was going to comment a little bit more about the passage that Mary Beth had commented about, and I know people were talking about the comma, and so I was right. And you think about, so Messiah had to actually, he couldn't promise that the thief would be with him in paradise today, because Messiah had to go into the ground to be buried for 3 days, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thief wouldn't go ascend before him. Right. Who would be the first to ascend? It would be Messiah. And how no one has ascended or descended except the Son of Man. There's a scripture, I don't know where that is, but I know also in Acts chapter 2 is a good one to look at, when Peter is talking on the day of Pentecost or Shavuot, and he's speaking about how even David, so it's Acts 2, verse 29 through 34, but he mentions that, men and brothers, let me speak boldly to you of the ancestor David, that he died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Then he goes on, and then he references that again in verse 34. For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he himself said, Yahweh said to my master, sit at my right hand until. So he's speaking about that, as
Yeah.
I've understood it. So something else to think about. And
Yeah, he didn't. David didn't ascend.
Right.
He
right,
in my understanding, went to the comfort side of Sheol, to Abraham's bosom, awaiting and looking forward to the time that he would be present. And we also know that Yahusha did descend before he ascended. So,
yes.
So those are all good scriptures to bring back to the table. I mean, that's a whole study, isn't it, in itself? I mean, there's so many scriptures that we could bring to the table and look at them from every angle. But, you know, sometimes when there's confusion, maybe with words and commas and stuff, you know, the artist in me, and Sal would probably connect with the artist in her too, since she does a lot of working with clay. You know, the patterns are unmistakable. The patterns speak 1,000 words, 1,000 words. And, you know, when I was getting confused about that 8th beast, you know, I'm like, well, who is that 8th beast? And you know, is of the 7, and some people were saying it was the 7th, and I'm like, was what, you know, and then I'm like, gosh, it was just like Yahusha just pointed me to Revelation 17 and said, there it is, there's the 8th beast. You know, it's a conglomerate, it's a conglomeration of all of that. Now, with the color becoming bright red, it, to me, does connect to the last final being Esau. There's a lot more to be said about Esau. And some of the best teaching I've heard is done by Kimberly Rogers Brown on the Esau effect. Really takes you into that realm. And then the other one, the kingdom, I think it's called the Kingdom of Edom, that she talks about the Sunnis and the Shiites, brings a lot to the table. Also, her website is Beast Watch News. I mean, her ministry is devoted to looking at the end time events. And the last 2 podcasts she did on Beast Watch News, I need to listen to them again myself, because I was listening to them as I was going to bed. So I think I was dozing off, waking up, dozing off, and getting bits and pieces. But wow, you know, she gave me a lot of insight to some of this stuff. And that's what Yahweh does, right? Every one of his people has a piece of the puzzle, and we've come to the table because he doesn't want any one person to know it all. He wants all of us to come to the table and bring our piece of the puzzle and work together and function together as a living, one new man, one body with him as the head, that is birth first in Revelation 12 of the one new man. And we have to rely on the body, the one body. And so all of these things are very exciting. And he wants us to see and he wants us to know his return is drawing nigh. And I believe all these things that we glean from his word, I just, when he sees us gathering on Tuesday nights, on Shabbats, on Friday nights, whenever we gather and study, you know, he's seeing the heart of each individual believer. And each time we seek to know more about him, in this lifetime will determine our position of closeness to him in the next, when we are in his presence. It's all going to be good, but the closer we can be to him, the better, right? Yes, indeed. So,
Libby?
Yes.
You said the name was Kimberly something Brown?
Kimberly Rogers Brown.
Rogers.
Yeah, I'll try to include, you know, as I do the follow-up and the edit for the sessions, I'll try to include some of those links I just mentioned so you'll have them. Really, really good stuff. You'll learn a lot. And she quotes the scripture and the verses and takes you through Esau and how he intermarried into Ishmael. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Very interesting.
Yeah, that was a really awesome teaching.
Yeah.
That video is a different video. It's not the same one I had.
Oh, okay, Donna. Oh, that's good to know. I mean, yeah, you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it. Well, y'all, look, I could talk all night. Believe me, I could talk all night long about his word. I get so excited. You know, you can ask Carol Ann and Bruce. I mean, they are so much a part of me being able to do this because they, you know, give me that time to just sit with him and paint these pictures.